When my mom talked about menopause, she called it the change, and it was all very hush-hush, as if there was something wrong about something so natural. Thank goodness with mental health awareness and actual research, we're beginning to understand the huge role hormones play in women's bodies. Being postmenopausal has its challenges, but if you're going through either perimenopause or menopause, then I suggest you try Hormone Harmony. Why? Happy Mammoth, the company that created Hormone Harmony, is dedicated to making women's lives easier. Hormone Harmony contains science-backed herbal extracts called adaptogens. Now here's the beauty about them. They help the body adapt to stressors, like chaotic hormonal changes that happen naturally throughout a woman's life. For a limited time, you can get 15% off on your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use the code SelfWork at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use the code SelfWork for 15% off today. This is SelfWork, and I'm Dr. Margaret Rutherford. At SelfWork, we discuss psychological and emotional issues and what you can do about them, whether that's learning self-acceptance, taking action, or seeking therapy or treatment. 8 years ago, I extended the walls of my practice to reach those of you who might already be knowledgeable about mental health treatment, but also to those of you who might say you'd never darken the door of a therapist. And yet, you are here. I'll answer your questions while I invite you to take a few minutes for your own self-work. There's another recent term. It's called intensive parenting, where you're always involved. And then there's its opposite, what's called free-range parenting. Maybe somewhere in the middle is good. And of course, it also depends on the personality and the character of your child. What are their strengths? What are their struggles? Welcome to this week's edition of SelfWork. There were many times when I was actively parenting our child that I thanked a psychology researcher named Winnicott. Back when he was writing, most theorists of the day blamed mothers for every possible problem a child might have. There was the schizophrenic mom whose chaotic and often you can't win for losing style of communication caused problems. The refrigerator mom was another one whose coldness led to the child escaping into autism. Not that mothers don't cause their children's problems. They, or should I say, we do, every day. But Winnicott came along and let moms off the hook a little bit, saying that they're caring as long as it was good enough, as long as she was consistent enough that most children would be okay. Now, fathers were left out of the whole pathology-causing picture, by the way, back then. Frankly, I had no real idea how to measure good enough as a mom. And I was concerned about it as most mothers are, although I recognize that some mothers have such tremendous emotional problems themselves, they aren't capable of providing basic trust and caring resources for their kids. Sometimes this has nothing to do with having emotional problems, but the environment you live in and are trying to raise your kids in makes that task almost impossible. So how do mothers do it? And since it's 2024, let's include fathers in that equation. What makes a good enough parent? And is being good enough enough? We'll talk about the answers to these questions today on SelfWork. The listener email I'm going to share brought tears of gratitude into my eyes. It was one of the kindest I'd ever received, although y'all's kindness toward me is something you, as listeners, often show me. We have a new sponsor today, Reverie. Not too long ago, I interviewed Dr. David Spiegel on SelfWork. We delved into the transformative power of hypnosis, which is the oldest form of Western psychotherapy and a powerful evidence-based treatment for numerous disorders. I was eager to try it. I've done hypnosis, been hypnotized myself, and am a big believer. Self-hypnosis is clinically proven to provide immediate benefits with an astounding 76% of Reverie members experiencing an immediate reduction in stress and anxiety. Reverie sessions are interactive and personalized, crafted by Dr. Spiegel to emulate an in-person session. I've tried these myself and experienced their effects. His therapeutic protocols induce a unique brain state that can be leveraged to improve sleep, high performance, addiction, stress, anxiety, chronic pain, and more. I've partnered with Reverie so you can also experience the power of hypnosis to combat overthinking and negative thoughts that may be holding you back. Right now, you can try Reverie free for 7 days and use code Margaret to lock in a 20% exclusive discount. Again, you can try it for free at Reverie.com for 7 days and then use the code Margaret to lock in a 20% exclusive discount. Let me hear from you. I've used the term good enough parent with clients over the years. Some hear it and feel relieved. Others kind of shudder and say something like, well, I hope I'm better than just good enough. Often those are my perfectionistic parents. I had that happen again recently, so it spurred me on to turn to this topic for the episode this week. I've heard about all kinds of apps that are out there for parents to ride close to the rail with their kids. Life 360, for example, can even tell a parent how fast their kid is driving, which is amazing. But there are a lot of articles out there that say that so many parents are trying to parent perfectly that they're maybe making some mistakes. I know what helicopter parenting is when parents hover over their children. Years ago, when I was still seeing kids, I saw a young teenage boy who struggled in school because he'd never learned to type and couldn't use a computer. Now, he was somewhere on the autism spectrum, but he told me quite sincerely he wanted to learn to type so he could type his own papers. I asked him what he meant. His mom was doing all of his homework. His tests were given orally, and he did very well. The kid was smart. So we invited his mom to a session to talk about this. What she said to me was this: I want him to get into a school that matches his intelligence, so I have to do this. I could have compassion for her fear. She wanted her son to do as well as possible. But another part of me could see how short-sighted that was on her part, and was perhaps a reflection of her not dealing well or really grieving having a child with special needs, or grieving that he even had needs. She took him out of therapy with me, so I didn't do a very good job talking to her about all that. Now there's an even more harmful category. It's called lawnmower parenting, where parents mow over any time of perceived obstacle to their kid being successful, being able to walk easily, whatever that means. Like the wealthy parents who paid for false documents to be provided to certain schools, saying things like their kid had been an ace on a rowing team, and so their child was accepted for that, and the child had not been anywhere near a rowing team. I remember when I heard that story, how bad I felt for those kids. What a message to get from a parent. But that probably wasn't the first time things like that had been done or provided, so there was lots of chaos there, most likely. But let's talk more about the good enough parent. As I said in the introduction, a man named Donald Winnicott came up with the term. I found a really good explanation of the basis of his theory in an article by Krista Bayless on Good Enough Parenting in today's Parent magazine. And I quote, he used the term, meaning Winnicott, to describe the necessary process whereby a mother who starts out hyper-responsive to her infant's needs naturally relaxes her responsiveness in healthy ways as the child grows and develops. But Winnicott recognized that adapting and then readapting to a child's ever-evolving needs for attention versus independence is no easy feat. I want to stress that, attention versus independence. And he reassured mothers that getting it perfect isn't possible, nor is it the goal. In fact, as long as she's usually reliable and her child is well cared for, her failures, minor miscues and slip-ups, are par for the course. Now, again, we're talking about TADS too. Being good enough as opposed to perfect, he said, ultimately fosters independence and autonomy in a growing child. He writes of the good enough mother or father, quote, her failure to adapt to every need of the child helps them adapt to external realities. Her imperfections better prepare them for an imperfect world. I remember so many bad mistakes I made. I laugh about this one, sort of, but I learned my child could roll over when he did on the changing table, and down he went to the floor. Oh my God, I was so upset. Luckily, we had a very thick carpet. That was only the beginning, really. There were other mishaps, and somehow he survived. One time we did have him seeing a child therapist or a play therapist, and I really greatly admired her. She made this suggestion to me about what she saw was needed change. Here was the issue. I wasn't spending enough playtime with him. I was trying so hard to cook good meals after coming home from work that I was doing too much and not having just relaxing attention time with him. I felt embarrassed, frankly, but I could see exactly what she was talking about and what his play must have reflected to her. Of course, then I took it too far one day when I found myself crawling into a dirty garbage bag to play Oscar the Grouch. How I got in there, I'm not sure. I thought, now wait a minute. This is too much. But what Winnicott was saying, he wanted ordinary moms and now dads to understand that not getting it right all the time, not being emotionally attuned to your child 100% of the time, prepares them to be able to cope with frustration or loss or disappointment in a world that's inevitably going to be disappointing. Let's say quickly here, this is not some kind of permission to be a bad parent, to scream whenever you want to or not attend to your child. As I've often said on SelfWork, one of the hardest things for me as a therapist is hearing what exactly was done or was not done for my clients by their parents. Abuse is alive and well out there, which makes me very sad and somewhat sick to say. But many mistakes are normal. For those of you, however, who would like a little more structure around this topic, let's talk about what exactly makes up good enough parenting. Here's a quote that I found that I loved. It's by Brittany Clare. She writes on a website called Lucy's List. Here's what she says. The problem is I dove in, meaning as a parent, not because I felt I needed to pad my children's resumes. I'm not yet stressed about college admissions, but simply because I heard people talking about all these activities their kids were doing, and I thought my kids would enjoy them too. Again, she's talking about how she kind of got on the roller coaster ride of over-signing up her kids. We signed up for swim lessons because safety. We're doing t-ball because my kids love it and it's great to be outside. My daughter is taking dance lessons because she's a diva. Birthday parties are back now, so there's one of those nearly every weekend. Right in the middle of looking into gymnastics and tennis and tumbling and piano lessons too, it hit me. I'm going to have to proactively curtail all this. But then what Miss Clare does, she goes on and gives 9 suggestions of how to keep things much more balanced and, could we say, good enough. But let me say something else quickly. If you've been on that roller coaster, you have a car that you drive your kids around in. If you can afford all those lessons, if your kid has a smartphone that can have Life 360 on it, then you're in a lucky bunch. There are many parents who only dream about those kinds of problems. So the fact that you have this problem is a blessing. Now I can hear I've worked hard for that, and I'm sure you have. But other parents are also working hard, but for survival. I say this to remind us all that the phrase, I wish I had that as a problem, is one that's important to realize. So let's take a break, and we'll be back in just a moment. Ever feel like you're too busy to eat healthy? Meal kits from Sunbasket are the perfect solution. No more meal planning or shopping. Every Sunbasket meal is designed by dietitians and chefs to be healthy, nourishing, and delicious with none of the hassle. You can choose from a brand new selection of quick and easy recipes each week, and you can order things like Mediterranean diet, vegetarian, carb conscious, even gluten-free. I love to cook, but some nights having those decisions made for you and so nutritiously with organic fresh produce is fabulous. You can also have pre-made meal options as well that are just as tasty and are ready in 5 minutes or less. Sunbasket takes care of all the hard parts of healthy eating and delivers right to your door. Remember, mental health is directly tied to what you eat or don't eat, and Sunbasket's offer is phenomenal. Go to sunbasket.com/selfwork today to save $120 across your first 4 deliveries. That's sunbasket.com/selfwork to save $120 across your first 4 deliveries, plus free shipping on your first order. So let's hear what her 9 suggestions are. Number 1, let your child experience frustration, disappointment, and failure. Even when my son was an older toddler, he knew his team hadn't won the soccer game. He could count. When his baseball team was named first in the league, he knew that he got lucky. His teammates were really good, but he couldn't run to save his life and spent most of the game way in left field. His sport was golf, and he was quite good later. And I was glad that he saw this and that he coped with it. Sure, he wished he was better at baseball. Frankly, I was glad he didn't like it because it wasn't my favorite activity. He had to try really hard to just be ordinary at that sport, and that struggle was good for him. Now, something you can do to help your kid with this is let them know about your own failures, your own struggles, in an age-appropriate way, of course, but they need to know that it's more than okay to not be great at everything. Number 2, don't play with your child all the time. My Oscar the Grouch moment was me overdoing the whole play thing. I had overcorrected for sure. So I backed off, but that was good advice for me and I needed to hear it. Actually, your child will benefit from deciding, what do I want to play now? What do I want to play with? What do I like to play? So independent play is important, as long as it's balanced. She says, embrace mediocrity. This one's a little hard for a perfectionist like me, but I was always the last kid chosen for anything that involved any athleticism. Not me. Kids cheated off my papers. That was true. I was smart. But I think what this embrace mediocrity means, you've got to be okay with them not being the best. Now, what about school? The stakes, especially around 9th grade when grades count, quote unquote, can send parents over the edge. Some parents handle this by deciding which kid has what skill. Oh, you're the smart one. You're the kind one. You're the athletic one. That's not so great, actually. Your kid gets the impression you only see one aspect of who they are. But your kid isn't going to be at the top all the time, and that has to be okay, more than okay with you. Perhaps a better question is, what's their potential? And if they're struggling to reach that potential, how can you help them? Number 4, sit tight on the playground. Parents can be so worried that their kids are going to get hurt or be afraid that you follow them around wherever they go on a playground. Let them have some independence. Now be aware, be near, but let them play without you. There's another recent term. It's called intensive parenting, where you're always involved. And then there's its opposite, what's called free range parenting. Maybe somewhere in the middle is good. And of course, it also depends on the personality and the character of your child. What are their strengths? What are their struggles? One child may need you more for reassurance. But again, what's their potential? How do you manage to not make that need worse? Remember, independence versus connection. You want to teach them both. That's a dynamic that's underneath so much of good parenting. Number 5, choose activities mindfully. This one kind of speaks for itself, I think. Try to think through both the short-term and long-term issues, and think about all of your children and the precedent you're setting. Number 6, and I actually like this one very much, let boredom happen. I was sick as a child. I had a neurological problem, and it seemed to me that I was constantly going to the doctor, who'd be hours late for appointments. And I'd sit with my mother in a drab waiting room with a bunch of adults. My mother actually said something pretty wise to me. When I would complain, she'd go, "There are no boring things, Margaret, only boring people." I've always remembered it. And I try to find something to this day, curious or interesting, in anything I do or wherever I am. Now, it's so easy now with cell phones to scroll or watch. But figuring out how to find the interesting things around you is a very active skill. And you don't always have to be engaged. Boredom also involves your mind or your body not doing too much, resting. Not too bad, and it won't kill you. Number 7, welcome your child's help. So often we're trying to get something done quickly or efficiently, so when a child asks to help, we turn them down. Or they're trying, and we take whatever it is away from them. Let mom help, except we take over. I made this mistake when we were visiting my young great-niece and nephew months ago now. The youngest had run to go open one of those big umbrellas that shade a table. He'd hiked himself up and was doing all he could to push it so that it would open. I thought I was just helping, but I was actually doing far too much of the work, and he was hurt and furious. I learned my lesson, and this was a good reminder to let children experience their own potency, their own efforts. And here's another point. If you accept their help and then let them do it, they'll learn that helping feels good and they'll offer again. That comes in very handy when they're 6 feet tall and you need some help getting something off a tall shelf. Number 8, check yourself and stay out of it. If your kids are fighting, wait. Unless someone has a weapon, which hopefully wouldn't happen in the first place, kids need to learn to have conflict and then make up. They do sometimes need your help to do that in a fair way. But if you intervene too soon, then they can't learn to find their own words to say how they feel. What if your kid's having a conflict with a friend? Let them talk it out with you, but encourage them to do the talking or the action, unless, obviously, whatever has happened has crossed the line and parents need to be involved. But you don't want to make that decision too easily. And of course, you can model handling conflict in your own marriage or partnership. Here's the last one. Ask your child, what do they want to do on their own? A client now months ago who was trying very hard to parent correctly had laid out all the things she wanted her toddler child to eat for a day. So the child had to eat what was right by the mom standards first. Then they could eat whatever they wanted from the selection offered for the rest of the day. Yeah, you may think this is pretty good, and in some ways, maybe so. But what is left out? What food does the child like eating? What real decision-making was the child involved in? I might add, this client had struggled with anorexia, so for her, even allowing the child to eat something by her definition, which was not good, was huge progress. But when we talked about it more, she could see the control she was attempting would ultimately, again, long term, not turn out so well. I'm not suggesting that there could be no rules around healthy things to eat, but again, being flexible is good. Introduce your kids to a lot of foods, but if they decide to be vegan, there you go. This thinking goes for activities as well. Many parents keep schedules. Is there a time in that schedule that the child gets to choose something they want? Pretty important. So many of us try to be really good parents, and I hope that these suggestions are helpful to you, or at least spark some discussion between you and the child's other parent. Here's our listener email. Thank you as ever for your weekly newsletter. Having just listened to your latest podcast, which was 408 at the time, I just wanted to reach out and say how sorry I am for what you are going through. It must be incredibly tough to lose a client in that way, and all of us who have been following your work for a while know that this is not the only time that this has happened to you or to many other experienced therapists. I'd had a client die by suicide. I can only say that the decision was his and his alone, and I don't think there's ever just one reason, omission, or life event which leads directly to a suicide. It's such a deeply complex area. All that I can be sure of is that you were a wonderful support and comfort to him while he battled against his immense inner pain. And you made things better, not worse, even though the pain ended up being too great for him to bear. Then she tells me about a young family member of her own who had died by suicide, leaving them quite devastated. She says, thank you, too, for your 11 tips on supporting people who need us to be there for them. I'm supporting a friend as best I can through a triple bereavement. Wow. I will certainly try to use your guidance and improve how I listen to her when we chat, especially how to react when the tears come, and I don't know how long we should sit in that space together before I gently try to bring some lightness and hope back into the room. Then she says, please do consider taking some time off from the podcast if that would help. All of your loyal listeners, which I'm sure many will totally understand. That was just so kind. Then she says, you can let John and Christine curate a few of their favorite podcasts from your back catalog while you take much needed time out with your family. I got huge tears in my eyes when I read this. This kindness is so appreciated. You're right. It is not easy, even though I'm not a family member. But it is hard. So thank you for your compassion. I hope you'll try out the new Reverie app. I've really used it and enjoyed it. It's quite calming. As always, I appreciate your listening here, being a part of SelfWork. Please email me at askdrmargaret or drmargaretrutherford.com. You can also subscribe to drmargaretrutherford.com and you'll get a free new ebook, which takes you through some exercises about how you know what you're using to sort of cover up or camouflage your own pain. And of course, subscribe wherever you listen. I also love it, especially if you leave me a voicemail on the SpeakPipe app, which is both on my website as well as here in your show notes. Thank you again for being here. Please take care of yourself, your loved ones, and your community. I'm Dr. Margaret, and this has been SelfWork.